Welcome back. As promised, I'm joined now by Panetta. His many former titles include Secretary of Defense and Director of CIA, and of course, White House Chief of Staff. Okay, Director of the Office of Management and Budget, Congressman, founder of the Panetta Institute, and walnut farmer. And I think that's the title you will always have first and last, correct, Mr. Panetta?
Yeah, you can use whatever title you'd like. I like the walnut farmer one.
All right. Former Secretary of State John Kerry has put out a statement on the president's remarks on Iran, and I'm curious if you share his anger that's in here, to be honest. It's a reckless abandonment of facts in favor of ego and ideology from a president who would rather play a high-stakes game of chicken with the Congress and with Iran than admit that the nuclear agreement is working. Pretty personal, pretty harsh. Do you see this that way?
Well, I think it is a terrible mistake at a very dangerous time in the world. It's not to say that there aren't legitimate concerns here about Iran with regards to their support for terrorism, their development of missiles, their general contribution to instability in the region, plus the desire to get a nuclear weapon. But what you have here is a situation where we've made progress on trying to restrain them from getting a nuclear weapon. And the real question is, how do you deal with these other concerns? And the problem is that the president has kind of rolled the grenade in the room, had it go off, without having a strategy as to where we're going. The reality is that we now have a decertification of this agreement and that they're not in compliance when they are, in fact, in compliance. We're out there alone without our allies. We've broken our word. And the bottom line here is we're throwing this whole mess to Congress, which doesn't have a very good record of trying to deal with anything, much less the situation in Iran. It's going to create a tremendous amount of confusion in a world that's already very dangerous.
You were in the administration, the Obama administration, when this was in the midst of negotiating. And look, this was a deal that took years to put together. Can you explain why the issue of Iran's support of terrorist groups like Hezbollah, why the ballistic missile issue, why some of the things weren't part of the agreement? You know, that's been the larger criticism from the president and those that have been critical of this deal is it was too narrow. It took too many of the bad things off the table with Iran. Why did that happen?
Well, Chuck, as you know, I wasn't in the administration at the time that the final agreement was made.
I understand that. Yeah.
I think the best thing I understand is that our allies, and we had a number of allies there at the table, Russia, China, Germany, Great Britain, France, all were present. And I think there was a lot of pushback not to deal with these other issues, but focus on the nuclear weapons issue because that was the primary concern. I have the same concern about the fact that those issues were not dealt with. But at the same time, the fact is they have abided by this agreement when it comes to nuclear weapons. What we need to do is to get them to the table to discuss these other concerns. But the United States cannot do that alone. We've kind of, we cannot just walk away from the deal and somehow hope that they're going to do this. Iran is going to say we broke our word. There's no incentive on the part of Iran to come to the table because they'll basically say the United States cannot be trusted. So in many ways, we've undermined the one opportunity we've had to try to sit down with Iran and deal with these other concerns.
Okay, but it does seem as if the president, in his own way, is simply asking, give me some leverage to go back and negotiate with Iran. So I understand that you may think it's too late. You may think it's already, that this, it's already been undermined, all those things. But what can Congress do? Let's assume they can do something here that could strengthen the president's negotiating hand without scuttling the deal. If you could design something, clearly the president wants to do this, what would it look like?
Well, I think, Senator Corker has some ideas that I think make some sense. What you would try to do is to make very clear that we are going to hold Iran to the terms of this agreement. We're going to enforce the agreement and make sure that they're abiding by it. And if they don't, then we will apply sanctions. And at the same time, I think we would also urge that the United States use the leverage of working with our allies, working with our the rest other countries in the world to try to see if we cannot persuade Iran to come to the table and negotiate on these other issues. But you have to do it by retaining the agreement in place, because once we break that agreement and tear it up and break our word, it's going to make it very difficult to do anything in terms of improving our relationship with Iran.
Very quickly, I want to get your reaction to John Kelly's debut at the White House podium. Here's one way he described his job.
I was not brought to this job to control anything but the flow of information to our president so that he can make the best decisions. I restrict no one, by the way, from going in to see him. But when we go in to see him now, rather than onesies and twosies, we go in and help him collectively understand what he needs to understand to make these vital decisions.
All right, as a former White House Chief of Staff, what do you think of his description there?
Well, Chuck, John has the right idea about what a Chief of Staff's job is. He's Chief of Staff. He's not President of the United States. And he's not expected to be able to tell the president what to do. What he has to do is to provide the president with a full series of well-thought-out options, develop a policy approach, and then present that to the president for the president's decision. I think that is ultimately the test, is whether or not you can have this president actually govern the country. That's going to be the test, not only for John Kelly, but for President Trump as well.
Leon Panetta, I will leave it there. Leon, go do some walnut farming, will you? I think that's what you want to do.
Working with a different set of nuts out here.
Okay. And with that, thank you and happy Friday.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.